Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-chara Swaminiti Namine Snigdha Chaita Supraneta Bhagvinam Charasakitam Prabhupada Pranam Nami Bhakti-chara Padam Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatjate Shutarine Om Jnanatirmirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Nena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Nena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhanvitangscha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarobhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiret Shrivatam Swakataha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridayantasto Yubadrani Vidunoti Suhurtsam Nashta Prayeshava Badrishu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttamashlokir Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. Today we're speaking on Canto 6, Chapter 3, Verse 25. The chapter is entitled Yamaraj Instructs His Messengers. So please repeat. Prayena Veda Taridam Namaha Jano Yang Devya Vimohita Matir Bhatamaya Yalam Trayang Jadi Krita Matir Madhupushpitayang Vaitanike Mahati Karmani Yujyamanaha Prayena Veda Tadidam Namaha Janoyam Deva Vimohita Matir Bhatamaya Yalam Trayang Jadi Krita Matir Madhupushpitayang Vaitanike Mahati Karmana Yujyamana Prayena Veda Taridang Namaha Janoyam Devya Vimohita Matir Bhatamaya Yalang Trayang Jadi Krita Matir Madhupushpitayang Vaitanike Mahati Karmani Yujyamanaha Prabhus. Prayena Veda Taridam Namaha Janoyam Mataji's. Devya vimohita matir vatamaya yalam. Trayam jati kritamatir madhupushpitayam. Vaitanike mahati karmani yujyamanaha. Ayena veda taridam namahajanoyam. Devya vimohita matir vatamaya yalam. Prema, almost always. Veda, no. Dat, that. Idam, this. Na, not. Mahajanaha, great personalities. Besides Swayambhu, Shambhu, and the other 10. Ayam, this. Devya, by the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Vimohita matihi, whose intelligence is bewildered. Bata, indeed. Mayaya, by the illusory energy. Alam, greatly. Trayam, in the 3 Vedas. Jadi krita matihi, whose intelligence has been dulled. Madhupushpitayam, in the flowery Vedic language, describing the results of ritualistic performances. Vaitanike, in the performances mentioned in the Vedas. Mahati, very great. Karmani, fruit of activities. Yujyamanaha, being engaged. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Because they are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yajnavalkya, Jaimini, and other compilers of the religious scriptures cannot know the secret, confidential religious system of the 12 Mahajanas. They cannot understand the transcendental value of performing devotional service or chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Because their minds are attracted to the ritualistic ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas, especially the Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Rig Veda, their intelligence has become dull. Thus, they are busy collecting the ingredients for ritualistic ceremonies that yield only temporary benefits, such as elevation to Swargaloka for material happiness. They are not attracted to the Sankirtan movement. Instead, they are interested in Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Purport. Since one may easily achieve the highest success by chanting the holy name of the Lord, one may ask why there are so many Vedic ritualistic ceremonies and why people are attracted to them. This verse answered that question. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 15, Vedescha sarver aham eva vedya. The real purpose of studying the Vedas is to approach the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Unfortunately, unintelligent people bewildered by the grandeur of Vedic yajnas want to see gorgeous sacrifices performed. They want Vedic mantras chanted and huge amounts of money spent for such ceremonies. Sometimes we have to observe the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies to please such unintelligent men. Recently, when we established a large Krishna Balaram temple in Vrindavan, we were obliged to have Vedic ceremonies enacted by Brahmanas because the inhabitants of Vrindavan, especially the Smarta Brahmins, would not accept Europeans and Americans as bona fide Brahmanas. Thus, we had to engage Brahmanas to perform costly yajnas. In spite of such yajnas, the members of our society performed Sankirtan loudly with mridangas, and I considered the Sankirtan more important than the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. Both the ceremonies and the Sankirtan were going on simultaneously. The ceremonies were meant for the persons interested in Vedic rituals for elevation to the heavenly planets, Jarikirta Matir Madhupushpitayang, whereas the Sankirtan was meant for pure devotees interested in pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We would simply have performed Sankirtan, but then the inhabitants of Vrindavan would not have taken the installation ceremony seriously. As explained here, the Vedic performances are meant for those whose intelligence has been dulled by the flowery language of the Vedas, which describe fruitive activities intended to elevate one to the higher planets. Especially in this age of Kali, Sankirtan alone is sufficient. If the members of our temples in the different parts of the world simply continue Sankirtan before the deity, especially before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they will remain perfect. There is no need of any other performances. Nevertheless, to keep oneself clean in habit and mind, deity worship and other regulative principles are required. Srila Jiva Goswami says that although Sankirtan is sufficient for the perfection of life, the archana, or worship of the deity in the temple, must continue in order that the devotees may stay clean and pure. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur therefore recommended that one follow both processes simultaneously. We strictly follow his principle of performing deity worship and Sankirtan along parallel lines. This we should continue. So before I begin speaking today, I see assembled before me many senior devotees, and I am the smallest person. So before I begin, I kindly request your permission that I may attempt to speak on Srimad Bhagavatam. Thank you. So just to recap this chapter here that we're discussing, the Yamadutas were defeated by the Vishnu Dutas, and after being defeated, they approached Yamraj and they asked, who exactly is the supreme judge? Because all this time I thought it was you, and there seems to be somebody else that has the qualification to override your rule. Therefore, so then Yamaraj replied that he, in fact, is not the Supreme Lord, and actually there is someone else, and those beautiful people are Vishnu Dutas, and they're assistants for that Supreme Lord. And their duty is to protect devotees from enemies, envious people, natural disturbances, and even Yamaraj. He then says that most of us are aware of the three modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, but there's actually something transcendental to that. And he says that this is called the real religious principle, or Bhagavad Dharma. And that Bhagavad Dharma is that we surrender to the Lord and to love him. He says that to do this, you have to chant the holy name. It's the beginning and it's the ultimate religious principle. And that by such chanting of the holy names, it relieves you from sinful reactions. And that's what brings us now to verse 25. Because they are bewildered by the illusory energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Yajnavalkya, Jaimini, and other compilers of the religious scriptures cannot know the secret, confidential religious system of the 12 Mahajans. They cannot understand the transcendental value of performing devotional service or chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Because their minds are attracted to the ritualistic ceremonies mentioned in the Vedas, especially the Yajurveda, Samaveda, and Rig Veda, their intelligence has become dull. Thus, they are busy collecting the ingredients for ritualistic ceremonies that yield only temporary benefits, such as elevation to Svargaloka for material happiness. They are not attracted to the Sankirtan movement. Instead, they are interested in Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. So just to look at who Yajnavalkya is and Jaimini, they are philosophers. Yajnavalkya specifically had this philosophy of merging with Brahman, and Jaimini, his philosophy is that we're like in this endless karmic cycle, and the highest you can get is to like the heavenly planets, which is why maybe we see that they talk about elevation to Svargaloka in this verse, or that Srila Prabhupada mentions it. So he also compares these philosophers that they only want the fruit of their actions, but their aim is not much higher than temporary happiness. Compared to the 12 Mahajans, which were, I believe they were mentioned in the previous couple verses. Lord Brahma, Narada, Shiva, the 4 Kumaras, Kapila, Swayambhuva Manu, Prahlad Maharaj, Janaka Maharaj, Bhishma, Bali Maharaj, Sukadev Goswami, and Yamaraj. Know the real religious principle, which is transcendental to the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance, transcendental to, I do this performance and I get this in return. So it's interesting to think that they talk about doing yagyas as a means of binding a person to the material world. I know I teach Shastra to grade 8 and 9 at the international school, and we were discussing this in our section of Science of Self-Realization. Srila Prabhupada mentions that there are 5 chains that bind us to the material world. And one of them, he says, is the performance of rituals. And most of the students, if I ask them, when I test them on their knowledge, the other 4, like you're attached to your body, and they can understand that. And you're attached to your home, you're attached to your land of birth, they understand that. You're attached to your family and your friends, they understand that. You're attached to mental or material science, and they understand. They can explain how we're attached and why we shouldn't be attached. And then when I come to this part about rituals and religion, they're like, I don't understand. How can attachment to rituals and religion bind you to the material world? For them, they're born and they're raised in devotional families, so they're only familiar with our types of rituals compared to other elaborate ones, the ones that are done for self-satisfaction for some material gain. So they had some trouble with that one. Reading this, I can see how it must be very frustrating that you have something really wonderful here. We have something really special, which is that we're able to completely break ourselves free from the cycle of birth and death with something very transcendental, which is the holy name of the Lord. And yet, someone sees, something shiny and they run toward that instead. And you're like, it must be a very frustrating feeling to have something really wonderful like that unappreciated. Srila Prabhupada refers to, in the purport, he refers to Bhagavad Gita chapter 15, verse 15. Krishna says he's the compiler of the Vedas, the knower, and what is to be known of the Vedas. So the whole purpose of all these Vedic sacrifices, of all these rules and regulations, all these things, is that we ultimately go to Krishna. But instead of that happening, instead of us going to Krishna, we ask, okay, can I have a little more money? Can I have a house? Can I have a nice this? Can I have a nice that? Could I at least have a little peace at my job today? Can I have, But we don't understand that the ultimate goal is for Krishna, to please Krishna, to satisfy Krishna, for self-realization. To understand our nature is to serve Krishna. And it seems that people are much more attracted to having fancy fire yagyas than chanting the holy name, you know? If there's a giant fire yagya going on with, big fire and and you see the little, you like that more than everyone chanting quietly in a room, I think. That's kind of how it goes sometimes. And it's unfortunate that some people have lost that taste. And reading this purport, I felt that there was some talk about impressions, like how we're trying to impress others. For example, I was talking with a friend of mine I was talking to her yesterday, and it was her first time in Vrindavan, and she was saying, and I was looking at her photos, and I was saying, I haven't been to Vrindavan in like 5 or 6 years. It looks a lot cleaner than I was last there. That's interesting. And she replied and she said, no, actually there was a lot of garbage everywhere. I don't know what it was like when you were there, but when I was there, but I'm here now and there's still a lot of garbage. And I'm just trying to take pictures of the parts that are a little clean so that when my family sees the pictures, they think Vrindavan is clean. So how powerful is an impression? The first impression, they say, is the most important. You don't get a second chance at a first impression, right? So I thought it was kind of interesting how we're talking about impressions, how something seems very simple. We're not so attracted to the chanting maybe, and we'd rather see a fire sacrifice. But if we knew how important chanting is, we would be more inclined to doing that than to doing the fire yajna. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about impressions and what impressions are basically. Why do we even care about having an impression, and what Krishna wants from us as far as impressing him, I guess. So first we can ask is, what is an impression? An impression is the effect that someone or something has on a person's thoughts or feelings. So the way a person sees you is basically the way they can judge you, and they can judge you for a long time based on that first impression. It can last forever. You ever have someone like judge you one way, and then later on they come back later and they say, I thought you were like this, but you're really like this. You're not so bad, and you just sit there like, okay, thanks, Haribol. So the way you present yourselves many times is the way that people judge you on that first instance. In fact, there was a research done by Princeton University that says that it takes 34 milliseconds for a person to judge you, for them to know exactly what kind of person you are, right? 34 milliseconds. So generally, it's based on your mood. So if you're like, then they're like, oh, that's a mean person. And if you're like, oh, they're like, oh, she's nice, So I mean, but it's just that instant, that a person could just sit and have an impression of you right away. We also have that tendency within our society. I've had people literally walk up to me and they say, "What's your name? Who's your guru?" And then they get an impression of who you are based on your guru, right? If I said my guru is Danavir Maharaj, they go, "Oh man, she must be so strict, and she must wake up at 2 in the morning and chant 64 rounds or something, right?" Like we get an impression, or maybe, if I say, okay, my guru is Bhakti Chara Swami Maharaj, and they say, oh, she must be so nice and so hospitable, because he's like that, he's a very nice person. So, they get an impression of who you are based on maybe who you're initiated from, right? Without actually having to make the effort to get to know you, normal things. So I would say this is kind of unfortunate, because when we do things like that, we miss opportunities to get to know a person or to be in a particular situation. I'll give you an example. There was one time I was at a temple, and there were, the kirtan is going, and then there's some ladies dancing like really crazy. They're like far out, dancing in the front, and then I was like with my friends, and I was like chilling in the back, and we're like, look at those girls, oh my God, look at how they dance, like, oh, whatever, And then, I don't know, and I was standing there, and the kirtan is so good, and I like really wanted to dance, and there's no room in the back, and I'm like, God, I'm so stupid, because here's these girls having the time of their lives, and here I am like an idiot, like criticizing in the back, when I could have been standing, dancing in the front and not caring, So when we lose sight of what's the most important thing, maybe it's dancing, it's the holy name, we miss opportunities. So why do we try to create certain impressions? It depends on the situation, I would say. Basically it comes down what your intention is. For example, I started, when I teach, I wear my glasses sometimes. Because I find that when I wear my glasses, they pay attention better than when I wear makeup and a nice sari and big earrings. And, when I dress like that, they're like, Mataji, I like your sari, I like your... They're not here, so I can talk about them. They have a separate Bhagavatam class now. But normally, they're so distracted by all these fancy things. So then I wear the glasses and I tie my hair back, and they know, okay, she's ready to teach Shastra, or she's ready to teach science. So the intention for me to give this impression of studiousness makes them focus. Some people, for example, maybe they dress real nice and they have the nicest, fanciest, straightest tilak, and the crispest japa bag. What impression are they trying to give? Maybe that they're paka and clean, right? Or maybe you see some people, they dress really simple, maybe their cloth is a little torn. What impression are they trying to give? Maybe it's that they're a sadhu or something. Maybe someone, when they speak, they can refer to lots of quotations from the scriptures. Everyone's trying to give some impression. Many times there's some motivation behind it, that they want people to think a certain way about them. But we can see that Srila Prabhupada in this purport, he's operating on a different platform. And that platform is a platform of preaching. It's in the mood of preaching. Because he says that he would have been satisfied. And many times he's done in temple openings and installations of deities, and it was very simple. There wasn't any, smarta brahmanas, and there wasn't so many elaborate sacrifices. If you read in Lilamrita or you hear stories from senior devotees, and they can tell you for sure that there wasn't so many elaborate things. It was very simple, and the focus was on Sankirtan and chanting. So the focus, like I said, was on. So the mood of that, however, for him to do that at the Krishna Balaram temple was because he wanted to take that temple opening seriously. He wanted the neighbors, he wanted Vrindavan to take Krishna Balaram seriously, to take the movement seriously. I also thought of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he took sannyas. Because the reason that he took sannyas was because he felt that as a grihasta, he was preaching and nobody was listening. They couldn't take him seriously. So he said, better I take sannyas. And if I take sannyas, then they'll listen. So even he took sannyas from the Shankaracharya Sampradaya. So it's not even in our line. But because the Shankaracharya Sampradaya was the most prominent at that time, and it was considered at that time really the only bona fide line, that's why he took initiation from that particular line, because his message didn't change. Even though he took sannyas, it wasn't like he took initiation, or he took sannyas and then he became a Mayavadi at the end. It didn't happen that way. The instruction was still the same, but he wanted to give it some more power, He wanted to give it a strong impression, right? so that he can get the respect of common people and from the Brahminical community. So you can see that Srila Prabhupada's mood, Lord Chaitanya's mood, was to establish legitimacy among the common, even the dull types of people, just to get them attracted, just to bring them in. Of course, you can't just be, you can't just do whatever you want all willy-nilly. You have to do it with some intelligence, It's, you can't water down like our message of chanting and our message of serving Krishna. So the question that we can ask now is, what kind of an impression can we give Krishna? And Srila Prabhupada, I read it on Facebook and I couldn't find it after. Facebook, you scroll past everyone's junk and every now and then you find like a nugget of gold. You know what I mean? So like I was reading this and I couldn't find it again. But there's like an instance where Srila Prabhupada says that we should be dressed very simple. And then Amataji says, Srila Prabhupada, what do I do if my husband buys me an expensive sari? And then Srila Prabhupada says, okay, you can wear the sari when your husband is around, but if he's not around, don't wear the sari because Krishna's not impressed by that sari. And I was like, no, I was like, oh man. But it was interesting, so Krishna's not impressed by how fancy our tilak is or how nice our sari is or, how my glasses or what, he's not impressed by those things. Krishna, so don't think that you can do some material thing or get some accolade and like Krishna's like impressed by it, In fact, in this age, there's only one recommended yajna, and that is Sankirtan Yajna. Because we have practically little to no qualification to do any of the other ones, really. Like, I think we would be a joke compared to like all the other yugas, the kind of yajnas that we do. But this Sankirtan Yajna is especially powerful, and Krishna is especially kind when we do this one. So if you want to make an impression on Krishna, we need to chant. That's essentially what it comes down to. And we can see that Krishna is so kind. He gives us so many opportunities with the chanting. For example, in the previous 2 verses, all Ajamil did was he just called Narayan. He wasn't even referring to Lord Narayan. It was his son. And then in the translation of text 24, I thought it was interesting. He said, even if one chants the holy name of the Lord with improper pronunciation, he will achieve relief from material bondage if he chants without offenses. So I thought it was like, as long as you chant without offenses, even if it's not particularly, even if you don't do it properly, it still has benefit. It still has some weight to it. Even Shikshastakam, Lord Chaitanya says that the holy name renders all benediction, all transcendental energies are there. There are no hard and fast rules. And I feel like when I hear all these things about how you can pretty much just chant anywhere at any time and do any, you can chant. You just chant. It's like Krishna is too kind. He's just so lenient. So then Srila Prabhupada comes in and says, nevertheless, where is it here? He says, nevertheless, to keep oneself clean in habits and mind, deity worship and other regulative principles are required. So you can chant in any state, but because we need some structure, we need to be clean, we need to be pure, we need to have some regulations, it is recommended that we do some deity worship. Some standard must be there so that we know, okay, we have to wake up before Brahma Muhurta and we have to take a shower that's just above freezing level. And we have so many rules that we must follow so that it just keeps us clean and pure, and then we're able to chant in a proper state. It helps us get closer to achieving our goal of chanting without offenses. However, we have to keep in mind that our main activity is Sankirtan. And I think we have a really special opportunity, those of us that are here in Sri Dham Mayapur, because we have this opportunity to chant every day in front of Panchatattva, in front of Lord Chaitanya. Srila Prabhupada says, if the members of our temples in the different parts of the world simply continue Sankirtan before the deity, especially before Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they will remain perfect. So we have a really special opportunity to have perfection because we're in Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's land, standing in front of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we should take advantage and we should chant, we should dance in front of him. We shouldn't, and we certainly shouldn't waste our time with other priorities. I know many of us, we have so much service that we're doing and we're so engaged in our family lives. Sometimes it's difficult and you can't make it to the temple and you can't make it for this and you miss many things, but try to come back to it. Try to somehow make the focus back on chanting, back on participating, back on being in front of Lord Chaitanya, because that's why we're here. That's why we came here, right? Many of us weren't born here, right? And we came here, we had these dreams. We said, we're going to come here, and we're going to go to Mangal Arati, and we're going to go to deity greeting, and we're going to chant all the rounds. We're going to chant more rounds. And then what do? They're like, Haribol, here's some service, and then something goes on, and then some other thing happens, and then there's a fight, and then you don't know what to do, and then, right? But please try and bring your mind back that the reason that you came here is to chant, so you take advantage of that opportunity. Not many people have this opportunity. Not many people have this opportunity, so take advantage. Our goal in life is to please Krishna, to love him. And he's not impressed by our fire yagyas. He's not impressed by fancy clothes or jewelry or nice tilak. He doesn't actually need anything. What's he going to do with a banana or a coconut? He can't do anything with that. But the one thing that he doesn't have and that he wants is our heart. He doesn't have our heart. And we have to try and give it to him. If we love him as much as we say we do, we have to make that effort. We have to try. In the rest of that verse in Shikshastakam, Lord Chaitanya says that out of kindness you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate because I have no attraction for them. This is our unfortunacy, is that we'd rather see a fire yagya than chant the holy name, which has so many wonderful opportunities waiting for us. And what do? We waste it on coconuts and bananas. So today we summarized the verse, we spoke about what impressions are, why do we give impressions, different types of impressions, and how we can leave an impression on Krishna, what he expects from us. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Prabhu.
In the book where Rupa talks about the deity installation for Vrindavan, and how to please unintelligent men, they had to do the Vedic rituals with smarta brahmanas, but actually he considered Sankirtan to be better.
Right.
So sometimes we find ourselves in similar situations where by social convention we're expected to attend some yagya or some ritualistic performance or some honorific event or something like that, when actually really what we would prefer to do is just sit down and chant more focused japa.
Yeah.
So what should we do in such circumstances?
You're invited to a yagya, but you'd rather chant japa. Chant japa at the yagya. There's usually, I don't know how many people attend outside yagyas, but at least within our community, we're fortunate that there's always some kirtan going on or something. So at least some, even the purport, he said, Simultaneously it was happening, but he gave more importance to the Sankirtan than to the Smarta Brahmins. He said it was more, that was the real deal, you know, so, hey. Yeah, at least our yagyas are focused toward Krishna. Whereas these other ones are more about material, you know, fulfilling material desires. So it's good that you want to chant. That's nice. I wish I wanted to chant. Just kidding. Anything else? Any questions? Yes, Mataji.
A few days ago there was a question about the Yamadutas, that why they were not told anything about who is a devotee, for them not to commit the mistake of trying to take them to Lord Yamaraj. No? And today, while listening your readings, it was mentioned, no, that how actually was an impression, the fact that the Yamadutas were not told anything about devotional service because they were not interested. We heard the other day. That fact caused an impression because when they saw the Vishnudutas, they said, wow, what's that? No? So I don't know if you could talk about this action of sometimes it's better to speak or sometimes it's better not to speak so much, and you are teaching children, so how different approach causes a different result.
So your question is, when should we, because you have to create that first impression, so when do you speak and when not to speak? Is that?
Maharaj said that they were not told anything because they were not interested. Yeah. So sometimes there is a tendency to overwrite or overteach, or so. How is the balance, no, to cause the right impression?
Right. First, you have to understand the level that a person is at. This is important. So, and kind of, you have to somehow cater to that level. So, I mean, one example that I thought of, but I didn't put it in here, I thought about how with Jesus, for example, the people were completely degraded. So what did he do? Like, you know, he turned water into wine and loaves of bread and so much fish. You know, you hear all these different things, these kind of magical things that you see, walking on water. Why? Because if you just gave them philosophy, they couldn't accept it. You know, so you kind of have to understand what level that they're at without diluting, of course, without diluting the message, right? Without diluting the message, but kind of see how you can how you can bring them from that platform to the other platform. Does that make sense? So it's not like you're way up here, and if you don't catch up, goodbye. You know, it's, you know, you get down there and you pull them up. Like sometimes I try to explain something and the student doesn't get it, and then I explain it another way and they don't get it. And I use an example and they don't understand. I use another example and they don't. And sometimes I have to use the lowest, stupidest, most crazy example in order for them to understand the point. You know? So, like, for example, Srila Prabhupada says in Science of Self-Realization, material inertia is the negative side of material action, but spiritual activity is not only the positive side of material negation, but the activation of our spiritual life. And you ask a bunch of 8th graders, what does that mean? And they're like, I don't know. You know? You ask an adult what that means and they're like, I don't know. It's a powerful sentence. It's got a lot of weight to it. So I gave an example. I said, if say, one day you had enough of the material world and you run into the Tarnpur forest and you give up everything and you give up all your material desires, have you actually become Krishna conscious? No. That's a negative side of getting away from material things, of negating material desires. Because the desire is still there. So what do? You come back, you get involved in temple activities, and you lose a taste for the lower things, and you gain a higher taste, and you activate your spiritual life. That's how you would explain that. And they couldn't understand it that way. And then I explained it a different way. They didn't understand. And finally I gave, like, I'm not even saying it in Bhagavatam class, but I gave, like, the lowest example. And this kid, when it came time for her test, like, it was like the girl had read Bhagavatam her entire life. She understood it perfectly, you know? So I didn't lose the essence of what I was trying to say, but sometimes you have to reach down into where they are to pull them up. Does that make sense? Is that answering your point or your question? Yes.
Just one thing on, if, for example, many devotees are just generally as taking, apart from chanting the holy name as being the primary stage of getting devotion and love for Krishna, for the Lord, and chanting the holy names, but throughout the stage from birth to death to everything throughout your life, there is part as in, Prabhupada also emphasizes on some scars and ritualistic activities as in taking that as a center to improve your chanting or to get devotees together. So that's like associating with devotees, but that's like a secondary aspect to comparing to the chanting of the holy name. So is that all right to do some scars and ritualistic activities as, once a person leaves their body, then, you have a program, and then one person gets married, you have a program, when they have a birth, then you have a program to bring devotees together in taking part in chanting the holy name. So is that considered also for the less intelligent, or that's as something that enhances one's devotion?
It's definitely something that enhances, because, first of all, because Krishna is always there. There's nothing, it's not separate from Krishna. Krishna is always the focus of these things. And chanting is there and devotees are there. So it's not bad. It's not like, oh, I'll never get married and I'll never, I mean, then you'd have to throw out every samskar, even like initiation. And, we're all going to die, Shalini.
This is what Prabhupada
I would hope somebody chants at my funeral, please.
So this is like other ritualistic, that's elaborate, that's dealing with only materialistic and otherwise not focusing on the main aspect of Sankirtan.
It's mostly in reference to just putting, when we put all our efforts in that ritualistic activity without understanding the focus behind it and without chanting, then it becomes binding, I guess.
So basically when we get too much absorbed into the details. And
Yeah. Without the essence, which is the holy name, which is getting together with devotees, which is having a samskara and entering another stage of life, which is meant to regulate us. Srila Prabhupada does say that, we do these performances as a means of regulation and a means of keeping us clean, as a means of keeping us pure. So there's nothing wrong. Thank you. Any questions or comments or criticisms, or is there anything that you would like to add?
I think that's a good point. I think, we don't want to be negative about rituals. We do want to encourage them because we do see that in preaching Krishna consciousness that often the congregation that they are very attracted and inclined to take up rituals, things like Annaprashna, for marriages and things, these are social functions, but if we can spiritualize them with some Krishna consciousness, then it's good. We do like to see rituals. Some spiritual groups, they don't have any rituals, and then it's very difficult for them to actually appreciate Krishna consciousness. So, there has to be a balance there. I think you made the right point that we need to stress the importance of the chanting along with the ritual. We don't want to stop rituals. We do encourage them, isn't it?
Yeah. There should be a balance, but know which one is the priority, is essentially what I personally got from the purport. But yeah, I agree. I like attending marriages. That's fun. Anything you can add or anything else?
I just have one comment. Thank you very much for the class. Is the microphone on?
Hmm?
Is the microphone on? Hello?
That's okay.
It's not working. I just wanted to. I just wanted to thank you very much for the class. It was a wonderful class, and I just wanted to speak a little bit to this Mataji here who asked the question about how to strike the right balance in preaching to individuals. And you gave the example of your school students. But I would just like to add that if you want to know how to preach on the right level to an individual, you just listen to Prabhupada's lectures. Prabhupada was the past master at how to, find that right point that the person he was speaking to or the congregation he was speaking to could understand. Just perfect preaching. So I would recommend if devotees don't already, the younger devotees, please make sure that you listen to Srila Prabhupada's lectures.
That's true. Yes, Prabhu.
In some places, Srila Prabhupada describes the ritualistic ceremonies and other Vedic programs as servants of the chanting of the holy name. So, in any family, you have the family and then the servants, and the servants assist the family in executing their real duties. So as long as the ritualistic performances or other Vedic ceremonies are enthusing us or assisting us in chanting and in connecting with Krishna and Guru in that way, then they're useful. And when they become an impediment, like if a servant decides instead of serving the master, he steals the silverware, then it's a problem.
Right.
Then that servant needs to be let go. That's pretty simple to understand, I think, no?
Yeah. It's an interesting analogy. I liked it. Thank you. Anything else? Chastisements? Anything? Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. Oh my goodness. I gotta go to school soon, my goodness. Let's see. Okay, we are attached to our material relations like husband, and we love them unconditionally. But for Krishna, that level of feeling is hard to get. I struggle with this thought. How can we have that deep love? What should we think to develop that? What should we think to develop that? Boy, that's a good question. I mean, just by following the process, I would say, honestly, like, when we read and we see what Krishna does for us, then we can develop that attachment. But if we know nothing about Krishna, it's very difficult to just walk it, So for me to have my husband is here. So, I didn't just see my husband and go, oh my God, I love you so much, I want to dedicate my life to you. That didn't happen. It wasn't like an overnight sensation. Whoever you are, you didn't develop that relationship overnight, unless you're in a Bollywood movie or something. That's another situation. But so what did I do to develop that relationship with my husband? I got to know him. I associated with him. I spent time with him. So if you get to know Krishna, spend time with Krishna, ask questions about Krishna, then you develop the attachment. So I would say that would be the first thing that you should do, is to associate with Krishna through reading Srila Prabhupada's books and through chanting. There's hardly an outside way other than doing those things. Doing devotional service, I would say, is also another thing. So that you can, you learn how to serve Krishna also. So I would say you can develop your love that way for Krishna. So thank you very much for the question. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. I'm just letting you know now, I will not be in that.